right.
Thanks. Welcome very, very much to Conversation. A great personal pleasure and honor for me to be able to welcome to the program one of the stalwart members of the team here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, who's had a very interesting life, that being Richard Speziale. And we're here to talk today with him, particularly highlighting or giving some understanding to the incredible, as I see it, and I think he also, the Wall Street occupation movement is gripping the city and the world. And Richard, thank you so much for coming in. It's a great pleasure. Welcome very, very much.
I am so thrilled to be here. This may well be the longest running television show in the United States. I haven't done all my research, but I am this, if not one, it's certainly one of the longest.
You mean mine?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, mine is, as I understand, for whatever it's worth, mine is the longest running public access show.
Oh, that's for sure.
But,
yes.
And I think public access is the hope in a very large way. It's hard for people to see it, but it's a very large place in which the major ideas. It's going to be a major ship, as it were, for bringing out the ideas that are inherent, perhaps, in this Wall Street movement in terms of communication issues.
Absolutely.
Because of the unique way it's set up and its capability of providing multimedia capacity to the people of the nation and as a model to the people of the world. I think it's really important.
And it's important to them. We are important to them. I was speaking to one of the press people down there.
Yeah.
We are important to them. Alternate media in general, they know that that's where their platform is, not with the corporate media, or not with the, because a lot of the corporate media is trying to malign it, trying to marginalize it, as they do most social protest activity. So the people down in Wall Street are thrilled with us and thrilled with the other types of media, their own media, basically their own people who are not beholden to corporate interests.
Yeah, and it's also there. We've been there for a long time. It's been about the 1970s. It got started, public access, and it's uniquely financed. It's supported by the cable industry through franchise agreements, the financing and so forth. That's very, very interesting. Private sector part of our economy supporting multimedia television, and we just had another franchise agreement made. It had been held up for about 3 years, but it gives Dan Coughlin and you people here a window to the future, 10 years when it gets finally.
So, yes.
Well, it's been signed. It's pro forma what has to be done now. So you got a 10-year window into the future, and that's really good. And there are 3,000 of these across the country, and it could be utilized probably far more effectively by the population. Many of whom think, well, we don't need that because we got our cell phone, we can make it here, or we got the internet.
That's an important thing because in 10 years there may not be any cable TV. Everything is morphing. Everything is going towards the internet now. Kids, this next generation coming up, they're not used to watching TV like we are, and they wonder, well, why do I have to go in front of a TV at 8 o'clock to watch a program? I can watch that program anytime on the internet.
Yeah, that's coming, but at the same time, you've got, like we have programming here, for whatever it's worth. We're going to get into talking, where it's aired on the cable systems in Manhattan. The most interesting thing to me is that it's streamed in damn near high-definition quality to computers everywhere in the world. It could be seen everywhere in the world. I'm much more interested in that than I am the airing on cable in Manhattan. So we're tied into that. And we were there. The public access was there, like like on the frontier, when there was nothing but a gleam in the eye of something called a computer and so forth, because it goes back to 1970. The Babbage machine and all the kind of things that were working, but it was working its way. So it was there, and I see the internet and all that coming as like the cavalry over the hill to vouchsafe what was established by the pioneers out there on the edge of that. And it's the same way with the leading thinkers and poets who have been leading the fight for a universal just system that may possibly be dawning, and the beginnings of a real, honest-to-God massive liberation of the human spirit that is the promise of this Wall Street occupation.
You think it might have a chance?
I'm hoping it does. I was just reminiscing. I had a friend, Abby Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
He got very depressed. A lot of people get depressed because there would be the need for justice. There's never been justice. It's an unjust system. They're calling it now 199. It's always been like that. People have had to kowtow to the power authorities and that kind of stuff. And the forces of poetry and of progressive thinking in the fullest sense of the word, and that has hoping for there being a system that is really liberal, and it may actually be coming to fruition now by dint of economic and technological state of consciousness is signaling a time where we might actually be able to get a context which is going to liberate the human spirit writ large.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Abby Hoffman. He was a leader of the anti-war movement in the 60s and into the early 70s. Mm-hmm. But they basically hounded him to death, they meaning the authorities.
Yeah.
I don't think...
Lenny Bruce was another.
Lenny Bruce was another one, yes. Now, I think that the people, Occupy Wall Street, the Occupy movement, are going about this a different way. They don't have a central leader. They don't have a central spokesman. They don't have one face that they put up there, a certain personality. That is a very smart move, because as soon as you put a leader up there, they're going to start hounding him.
It's called divide and conquer.
Yes, as soon as Abby Hoffman came to the forefront as started getting television time and press and getting noticed as a leader, then that's when the FBI got on his case and continued until the end. Last year, WikiLeaks, they had a leader, they had a front person, Julian Assange. Look what's happening to him now. He's fighting his extradition to Sweden. He may well end up in the United States, may end up getting a 20-year sentence or more. He was a visible leader. This group is resisting getting visible leaders and even down to specific goals. Because what happened to the Tea Party, and a co-founder of the Tea Party said this, that the Wall Street occupiers are very smart not to have a list of specific goals. As soon as you narrow it down to a list, they can try and coalesce, try and meet some of those demands, they meaning the powers that be.
Co-opt.
Yes, it can get co-opted. This is much bigger, and as you alluded to before, this is a system-wide change that's being demanded and would be necessary to effect the changes that everybody down there is asking for. The tax system needs to be reformed because it's skewed to pay off the top 1%. The electoral system is certainly suspect because a lot of those kids down there do not have any faith in the voting booth. A number of people have said they should occupy the voting booth. They shouldn't be occupying Wall Street. But take a look at the mayor in this town. The mayor got his third term by overturning the results of two overwhelming elections, two elections where the people of the city of New York approved term limits. He had that overturned. He jerry-rigged the system so he could get a third term. And it just so happens that this guy who started out, he was a rich guy when he started out. He asked for $1 a year salary. 8 years later,
he's $40 billion richer.
Well, he was $16 billion richer. Suddenly, he becomes, as mayor of New York, suddenly he's the richest man in the city of New York. And when they were saying, when Egypt went down earlier this year, there was a parallel. They said, well, Mubarak got rich while he was the president of Egypt.
Obscenely so.
Obscenely so. Well, the same thing happened here. Well, so a lot of kids are very suspect of the electoral system. It certainly needs change, certainly needs to get the money out of it, because the money is the big problem.
Campaign finance
reform. I was shocked. I was shocked. Maybe you remember this, but I was shocked to hear Jimmy Carter on TV. He said that the 1980 election, he took no funds, Ronald Reagan took no funds. That may have been the last honest election in this country because they only took the campaign funds that come from that little thing that you check off on your taxes for $1 or $3. They raised no money. They ran a presidential campaign without raising any money. Today, That's unheard of. That's mind-boggling that they actually did it.
Citizens United. I mean,
particularly after,
in the Supreme Court,
and the Supreme Court. So, I mean, they say, well, you should go through the legislative process and you should go to the voting booths. Well, that's a big part of the problem because it's all corrupt now. I think part of the big problem with the electoral process is right now we know who the two candidates are going to be a year from the election. The primaries don't mean a thing because the candidates are already cemented in place by the time the primaries come.
Like a kabuki dance or something, or
yes.
some sort of a
it's
puppet
like
show or something.
It's a puppet show. It's a dog and pony show.
Dog and pony, that's the term.
And that's a show. And the younger generations are not buying it. We've all been fed, well, this is the process. This is how you elect somebody. This is the American way, and anybody can become president. The kids aren't buying it, and they see right through it, and they know the system is heavily rigged towards big money, towards big campaign contributions.
Right. But that's it. Then they say, we're going horizontal. I think that's wonderful because they're just including more and more and more. That fits in with Gaia, which is a good principle that we could finally get to where you see we see the evolutionary process as an organic thing in the universe, which begins to get to really systems thinking where we get including a great number of things rather than focusing on a specific issue, as you say, which they have done. And it also gets us back to where we can start putting it in a proper perspective. I do think there ought to be a place for the people who have made heroic gestures toward freedom for all, that took chances at the freedom riders who would go down and face the dogs rather than stay comfortably back somewhere else. There were people who took chances and they pushed it. And Martin King and Malcolm and some of these people who took chances and to advance the force of liberty and on a human scale, and particularly intellectual chances which might undercut their careers, their possibility of comfort.
Well,
those things should not be denied in the name of the leaders. There's a certain leadership quality of people who have led that, and they become martyrs often. We had Spartacus. We got Spartacus that tried to do a slave revolt, and he failed. Or you had Jesus. He became a martyr, and it became a meaning to a lot of people.
Speaking of martyrs, how about Mohammed Bouazizi? In the past 12 months, he is the man. He was selling fruit. He was constantly harassed by the police in Tunisia, and he set himself on fire. He martyred himself. He couldn't take it. That started the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring started all this stuff, ultimately leading to Occupy Wall Street, and that's why there is a worldwide network now. All these people are in touch through the internet, through Twitter, whatever. And
by going horizontal like that, what's encouraging about that is they're not going to get themselves strung out on a particular issue that can be and the intellectual,
because it's not one thing, it's everything.
It's everything.
It's everything.
But that's going. So then, if it is, Richard, if it is everything, then one of my favorite lines. Anybody who watches my little series that goes every here is James Joyce having Daedalus say, "History is a nightmare," and one could add of injustice, from which we're attempting to awaken. It's always been unjust.
Yes.
All of human history. I think it began when we came out of the cave, and that begins to get to a pattern where we can get, instead of the issue du jour, the thing from this week and the news and so forth, is that it's a larger order of transformation that we're talking about, even than just the normally understood dialectic of political development throughout the human experience. We could begin to get back to where they're now being inclusive, to where they're including. Reality is a seamless web. Everything is connected to everything else, and we're getting back. We almost have to get, now that we've got the physics, we've got the knowledge, it's beyond just the enlightenment that came, and we're getting back to where we understand the genome, we understand the way the brain works. Every day, Richard, comes a revolution over the transom from every field. There's a quickening of understanding and knowledge of what our place in the universe is about in scientific terms rather than the creation stories that had to be created through our 200,000 years sojourn on this planet, the species, in order to get a sense of dealing with their self-reflective consciousness, able to ask the questions of what's it all about. there was no ability for Australopithecine to contemplate such a thing 4 million years ago. We were contained, our species was contained historically within that, and then that matured and it came and we got to a point. So they invent these creation stories and so forth. And now we get back to where we can begin to take the measure of the universe. We're taking the measure of the universe. The Wilkinson telescope has a picture of the shock wave of the Big Bang beginning this universe 13.8 billion years. And it's amazing, within just a couple of 100,000 years of its occurrence. So what we can begin to do is begin to take this measure, not in some political term, like the good guys versus the bad guys, or like that. We can begin to see, we have to begin to start approaching, we're getting to a condition of, it's almost like speciation. We're getting to a point like Stephen Jay Gould and Eldridge Wright, punctuated equilibrium. You have a thing in steady state. We've been here 200,000 years, and we're coming into a state of servile, primitive state that we've been in called humanity. We're coming into a thing of a liberation of the entire Homo sapiens species within an ecological context that is available to us now as a result of our technological extension of our capability. We have a capability that is truly liberating and making possible a liberated world for everyone that will bring us into a new relationship in universe like speciation. At the same time, though, that extended consciousness has delivered weapons that can now wipe out the entire species. That only occurred within our lifetime. It's like a quickening in a pregnancy. So it's really big term where we can be species thinking. We're coming to the end of a whole experience and begin to think about things in that way. And that's why they're getting to systems thinking. They're getting to real comprehensive thinking and not all the petty little parts by which they divide and conquer the people of the world, the political process. That's what makes it so, if you can understand what I'm getting at, this is the time where we can start thinking really big, evolutionarily, new species on the horizon, new relationship in the cosmos called liberation that we don't have examples out of history. History has to be subsumed, and it has to be assumed, and it has to be hoisted, if necessary, on its own petard in order for us to make that. And we're at the point where we can either eliminate, couldn't do it until about 1970, the entire species, with the weapons. Couldn't do it in the Second World War, or liberate. And it's on that kind of a dialectic that we can begin to see these things playing themselves out, if you can understand all of that.
Well, what I relate to is, and I don't know if I can make this totally clear, but earlier this year, a dear friend of mine who happens to be an astrologer, she explained to me that this year would mark when things accelerate. And she was explaining to me that some ideas took 1,800 years to spread around the world. Maybe democracy is one of them. It started in Greece, and then, there were 17th, 18th century, we had America, France. So that took 1,800 years. Then after that, it took 180 years. And now it's approaching 180 days, 180 minutes. The spread of information.
In a pregnancy metaphor, it's quickening.
Yes, and I didn't know.
Water's about to break.
I didn't know what she meant at the beginning of the year, but then I saw the Arab Spring, then I saw the union organizing in Ohio and Michigan, and now we have Occupy Wall Street, which has spread throughout the nation.
And the world.
And the world. Well, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, we've caught up with the rest of the world because there were demonstrations in London last year, in Madrid, in Greece, in Italy, over the same thing. So we're kind of late. There was the Arab Spring, which spread into Europe. We're a little late on we're a little late to the party, but they're all happy to have us and happy to see us waking up.
But the pattern that's in place is essentially, if you think of it in terms of everything, the pattern's in place in large scale, without the creation stories and things that we've had to deal with and everything, is essentially, it would seem to me, and maybe you're wrong, I think we did have Marx, we've had Karl Marx, we've had that, and we get into political, but it's the model of the Enlightenment, the Scottish Enlightenment that was established by the United States in 1776, steam engine, heralding an industrial revolution. That pattern that was established here is the one that more or less has been accepted by the world, and that is accepted Before that, there was Rome for 1,000 years. It was assumed legitimate. They had the power to enforce it for 1,000 years.
Right.
Then after that, for 1,000 years after the fall of Rome, you had the hereditary states, the dynastic states. They were thought of as being historically legitimate.
Right.
They assumed their own historical legitimacy.
Right.
Now, what have we questioned that in 1776? The rest of the world cottoned on, France and that, and now that's the pattern that's in place. It's the international order, it's the banking system, it's the political system, it's the ideas of organizing society, which has assumed that they're politically or they're historically legitimate.
Right. But
and it is not.
It is not.
And so it's being questioned at that level, if you can understand what I'm saying.
It is absolutely
it's our
being
pattern
questioned.
that's being questioned.
And I think it takes this...
And the people who've cottoned on to our pattern.
Yes, and I think it takes this next generation, the 20-year-olds that are in the streets right now, I think it takes them to recognize it. In a way, my generation, your generation, we were taken in. We were told in school that there is a democracy, it's legitimate, anybody can become president. The policeman is your friend.
Yeah.
Now, the police have been militarized throughout this country since September 11th. Totally militarized. They have been. The police used to be considered one of us, one of the working people in our community. But now the police are, by a large extent, all these riot cops in the street. They are treating us, the people that they're paid to protect and defend, they're treating us as the other, the enemy, just because people are exercising their First Amendment rights. And this is a big shift and a very dangerous change.
I think they're getting worried. I think they may be actually, the power du jour, the power elite du jour that's there.
They're scared to death of this movement.
Think they are?
Yes,
you think
they absolutely are.
But don't
because
they think from experience, well, they'll just go away when it gets
that's
cold,
what they want to.
They will,
that's what they said.
We'll beat them into, or we'll hire them, we'll do something, we'll co-opt them.
That's what they've
always
been saying.
done.
And
they've always been able to do it.
But that's what the right-wingers were saying to me. Oh, well, the first snowfall, they'll be out of that park downtown. Well, they are out of that park downtown. They can no longer camp there. And in a way, that ruling we had on Wednesday, in a way, that judge is right. It's not about the tents. It's not about 200 people sleeping in a park. It's gotten much bigger than that. It's much more significant than that.
I've had thoughts on that. If you want me to share
them,
would you?
Please.
I think it's really important. I don't know. You're too young, or you didn't have to. Thank goodness. I was of an age where you had to be what they call drafted into the military.
I just missed that.
I was a terrible soldier. I really was bad because I used to keep getting Article 15s for being a smart aleck and everything. But
where were you posted? Where were you
I got posted as it happened after the boot camp and all that. I really didn't fit. I'm anti-authoritarian.
Where were you?
Well, I was in Puerto Rico, which was paradise. It was very nice duty I had. It was
and did Puerto Rico get attacked while you were on duty?
No, they didn't.
There you go. You did your job.
No, but the point I'm making is vis-a-vis Faludi Square. What is that place called?
Zuccotti Park.
Zuccotti Park, Liberty Park. Is that they're there, and we have iconic footage. Frank Craven and some of our people have been down there. It was one night where it was terrible rain, and they're down there. It was like Valley Forge. You know, they're down there, and the rain is falling, and they're in this thing, and they're saying, "Well, we'll be here," and everything. It was iconic footage, and they're so to be commended. But the thing is, in the military, they have what they call guard duty. You have people there, and they get a team of people, and you go from 8 till 12, and you go walk the perimeter. You go out, and then you go back, and then you go. So what we should be doing, and I was really happy. The church down in
Judson Church is doing that.
They opened the door right away when they were being. So what the churches and the people who support this movement, of which I see on some of the things, 76% of the people in the New York City area are in favor of it.
In favor of it,
yes. And across the country, people are in favor of your shake.
Because they know these kids are right. Well, I've heard people say they're wrong-headed, they should occupy the White House, they should occupy the voting booth, whatever. Nobody has said, well, they're wrong. It is a fair economic system.
No, I don't think anybody's going to say that.
Nobody on Fox News. Nobody.
Not even on Fox News.
Not
but anyway,
even,
the point being, Richard, is what they should be doing is the churches or the community buildings or the universities. You get some sociologists, the departments, or people. They should be making spaces near where there's an occupation going on. And then what you have is there you have the cots and the showers and the food and the teaching going on like we did or could do. And then what you do is you have, 20, 30 people who go to Zuccotti Park on a little yellow school bus like Lucius Walker, God bless him, took to Cuba. Go over there and do it, and then they go for 4 hours, and then they come back, and then another group comes,
exactly
and they just keep it going all the time, and they don't give up land at all. They keep it going. They have a rotating thing, and they got support from the community. The university people could start having things set for gymnasium. They could give support from and involve the community rather than just watching it on television and saying. And then they could also have teach-ins going on. They could have things going on and let it grow into
Harold,
the whole
all
society.
All those
are
things
they working
happening.
that out?
Yes, they are. They're very organized.
Anything to keep it going.
When they moved in and occupied that park 2 months ago on September 17th, they knew bathroom facilities are going to be a problem. The restaurants are not going to be that welcoming the third day we all come in to use their bathroom and not buy anything.
Were you at
So they asked, no, I wasn't, but they asked the city, where can we put the porta potties? And the city said, no, absolutely not. But sooner or later, they found a loading dock in the area where they were able to rent the porta potties. So they worked that out. They're being very smart about this whole thing. And it's a shame that they lost the occupation part, but
they haven't lost it. They're back.
They're back. They just can't go in with tents.
They can't go in with tents. But what I'm saying
that solves a problem for them
too. It's called logistics.
And they
if you're in a war, you have logistics. You don't have everybody on the front line. You have people coming in on a rotating basis to keep the show going there, and then come back and have it going over here in the back where the food and the showers and the comfort, and then support from the community. Let the community support it. Our churches. And people who support the troops at Valley Forge kind of idea, and to have it in a rotating base. I think that's a really good idea. And then out there in the park they are, and then get it a lot. Occupy everywhere.
Yes.
And then have support from the community and let the community contribute. Do you think that could happen? Or is that too idealistic to think that communities, the churches,
is happening, yes.
the academics, they could even have it in high schools as a civics project.
Right.
They could have support the Occupy Wall Street movement as a thing within the school system.
Yes.
Start subverting everything.
Well, I don't know if it's going to take place in the public schools, because the city has put up a great deal of resistance.
They're going to put up,
and
but
this city and other cities, and I think it's absurd, the notion that we have had demonstrations going on long before New York was the financial capital of the world. We had world-class, world-famous demonstrations in the 19th century.
That's right.
Okay? So this is just another regular public event.
Yeah, but I don't want it to be just another regular public event, because they always just beat those things down. They never come to fruition.
Well, hold it. Back up. You're taking it a step further.
Trying to take it into worldwide revolution to get justice and a system that can come finally after all the work.
Let's take a look at the resistance that the city has put up.
Co-opt.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the resistance. As I said, the police have gotten militarized. Demonstrations in New York, as I said, they go back to the 19th century. They're going to happen. They've happened in the past. But this current administration is refusing to give anything really to the demonstrators. The position of the Bloomberg administration, well, you have to hold your demonstration on this little piece of the sidewalk, and we have to let life continue on as if nothing's going on. And they don't say that for a baseball game. They don't say that if there's a movie shoot. They close off streets. They make accommodations for these things. This is free speech. This is New Yorkers and Americans exercising their free speech rights, and the city is refusing to accommodate that. And in the city's refusal, that's where you get women getting pepper sprayed. That's where you get cops getting thrown unknown liquid in the face. 7 of them went to the hospital. We think it was vinegar, but some cops got thrown some unknown liquid in the face.
The other night.
This was yesterday. Yes, the 17th. But this is happening regularly. This happens when the city refuses to accommodate something that it knows is going to happen.
Well, the people of the system, I mean, the system is all run by a few people.
Yes.
The power is all there in the hands of a few people. It's become more concentrated.
Right.
So the power structure is not going to want to hear this. They will say, we believe in free speech and everything as long as you don't say anything.
As long as you don't say anything,
right. Make any demands. You just do what you're told, like
right.
serfs on a feudal estate.
Yes.
That's what they're used to.
But it is selective enforcement. I didn't see. Now, when they started evicting people over the past 2 weeks, not only in New York, but in Oakland, Portland, other cities. Yes.
Yeah.
When they started doing that, that was a coordinated effort by the Homeland Security Department.
Yeah, I think they'd like to smash it quick. Get back into your stalls, you slaves.
Yes.
You know,
so,
it's like a slave ship or something.
Remember, and you were one of the first people to make me aware of this Homeland Security Department. Now it is the third largest agency in the government bureaucracy, mm-hmm. and what we all knew would happen to Homeland Security has. We all knew that they're not going to find any foreign terrorists, mm-hmm. and all of this energy, all of this interdepartmental mm-hmm. stuff, all this spying is going to turn on us, the public. It's going to turn on Americans.
It looks like it's going private sector now. You got private sector
private
prisons,
sector, absolutely,
private
yes.
sector, and you're going to have what do you call them? What do you call those people? What do they call the Hessians?
Well, hired help.
Hired help. They had a term for it, though. You know,
Hessians. It was government. I forget what the term is.
Mercenaries.
Mercenaries. Yes.
They were hired.
Yeah.
They're hired gung.
When they talk about how many troops are in Afghanistan, that's just the troops. That is just the people who are enlisted.
All the Blackwater.
But there's tens of thousands of people over there who are kind of operating in a gray legal area, and they don't count these people as troops because it's all gone private.
And our system, even our system, that we give almost religious, obsequious concern, for the Congress and the electoral system and everything. It's so corrupt. It's unfunctional.
Right.
It's getting to where it can't function. The Congress can't function.
Right. And there's no difference between the Democrats or the Republicans. Right. They're all dirty. They all get their money from the same sources. And they've all been co-opted. And this is a big game that your generation, my generation, largely accepted. Yes, there were challenges, but largely accepted. I think what we're seeing now with the kids down on Occupy Wall Street, they are not accepting this. They are not accepting that this is a legitimate system and this is the only system. They are challenging it because they know it's corrupt and they know that they don't have a chance. And it's getting worse. Statistically, it's been getting much worse since Reagan. Since Reagan, the wages of working people have been flatlined, while the riches of the top 2, top 1%, top 10% have been peaking. So essentially what I'm earning right now is pretty much the same as what I would have earned in the 1970s in terms of real dollars. And this is the first generation that's happened to. It didn't happen to my father's generation. It didn't happen to your generation. But this generation is the first generation in a long time in American history that is not going to do better than their parents'
and
generation.
They're almost accepting it.
And they're pissed off about it.
No wonder.
They're pissed off about it. And they can see that their children, these kids are starting to have children of their own, their children, it might be a much worse place. We're heading towards being a third world country in a lot. We're not fixing the infrastructure where there are tons of jobs to be had. But the line of this country is, well, let it fall apart, or we can't do that. And that's absurd. That's absurd. A bridge fell down in, where was it, Minneapolis a couple of years ago.
My daughter was going right over that bridge
my God,
when she was getting to her new post at Minneapolis University.
Yes, I mean, look at where this country is. We are number 40th in internet speed, number 40th. Romania has better internet speeds.
South Korea.
South Korea, yes. All of these little countries, we're not number one. We're number, in terms of math skills, we're number 40 with students. In terms of science skills, we're number 40. Do you know that a lot of people talk about, well, China's taking over, we're competing with China. Guess what? China is going to graduate more honor students than we are going to graduate students. More honor students. Their honor students outnumber our graduates. And we're still not, they're still trying to attack teachers' salaries, pensions of teachers. They don't pay the teachers in this country, and why the hell not?
Right, well, they never did,
And in places where there is collective bargaining for teachers, statistically, the students do better. Where the teachers have more job security, better pensions, the students do better statistically. So it can be shown there's a direct correlation. So what they're doing in Wisconsin, attacking the teachers and all over the country.
That guy being voted out now, what's that guy?
Well, there's a recall effort.
There
is a recall effort. They have a year to do it.
Yeah.
600, I believe they have to have 650,000 signatures. But
what's
again, they've been Tommy Boy Walker.
Okay.
Tommy Boy Walker. That's what I call. Hey, I mean, he was new. 6 weeks in office. He tries to overturn collective bargaining. 6 weeks in office, his capital is shut down because it's occupied by angry citizens. So that's the kind of thing that 6 weeks in office, this guy gets in and screws everything up. I hope he does get recalled.
But
that is one of the few mechanisms that may work in terms of the electoral process. Because it's been shown term limits don't work. The whole process doesn't work because it's fixed. We have 2 candidates for president next year. It's either going to be Romney or Obama. And guess what? Obama's going to get in. Nobody's going to vote for Romney. The Tea Party don't like Romney. The Republicans, if they liked him so much, they would have elected him before. He's had a chance before. So we're basically, I know a year before the election, I don't have a crystal ball, I don't have insight into the future, but I can see the writings on the wall. We're stuck with Obama for the next 5 years.
It would seem that way, and he's not exactly seen the same way he did on election night in 2008, is it?
We were dancing in the bloody streets. Nobody, when he wins the election next year, nobody's going to be dancing in the streets. They're going to be like, well, why didn't we hold his feet to the fire, and what the hell are we going to do with him now? He was the lesser of 2 evils, and he seemed like a very good idea at the time, but like any other politician, he lied and he didn't do what he pledged to do.
Well, I wonder, now that's the thing that we could do, because where's it all heading? That kind of thing is questions that could come up. It's interesting to me, China, you bring it up and everything. The new guy in China, I forget his name, but next year he's going to come. But his expertise, his area of intellectual and educational expertise and everything is dialectical materialism, Karl Marx. They call themselves, they're trying to say that state capitalism, which is there, growing, and everything, following our model. We're just interlinked with them. It's state capitalism in any term. But they claim in a religious fervor to be Marxist. They say that they're Marxists. They're representing the proletariat. That
seems like they're trying to have it both ways.
Well, okay, but the point being, in a certain sense, is where do we go? What is it that's going to be? What are the major issues that are confronting? Because they've just signed on to our system. They're just doing it. They got their own. They got, I don't know, 300 million people who've done pretty well, Shanghai, and they got 1 billion people living on $1 a day. Lots of discontent. And what are the major issues that are going to be confronting? One of them is the economic theorizing, or how are we going to do things, and the left, let's just say, progressive community, were enthralled to Marx. Is Karl Marx a socialism or a Karl Marx kind? Is private property? Is the private sector? Naomi Klein writes really beautifully on economics, with Amy and that, and she does not say we're going to have some sort of a socialist paradise. A lot of people think you're going to overthrow the capitalism, and then you're going to have a socialist order that's going to bring. They tried it in the Soviet Union to do away with the private sector. Naomi says we got to have a mixed economy. We need a private sector, and we need a public sector. We need both. What's likely to come out of it, and what's the overall pattern that's going to emerge that's going to be able for us to realize the capability, and what are the transformations in a large way that might make possible what has never been possible out of history, that there's been some alteration in the zeitgeist or in the overall reality. When you get to a point where you can obliterate the species with your weapons, you may have at a level of capability transcended scarcity as an ontologic reality never mentioned. But if that's the case, that's a new reality. And then if you get to that, how are we going to hoist capitalism on its own petard, as Will Shakespeare suggested, and the institution of private property? Why do we allow all the private? Are we going to eliminate private property? Are we going to eliminate the private sector? What is it that we're going to do collectively, human society? Or is there going to be some transformation of the private sector and the private property principle? Why do we allow all the capital assets to be owned by a tiny class and only distribute buying power to the people through them being workers? And they've been hoodwinked with the idea that work is so wonderful, the labor theory of value, which informed Marx, surplus labor. What is the theory that's going to bring us to a thing which can hoist the system on its own petard?
Well, you got me. I don't know what the system is, but
it's going to have to come to something.
Let me speak to that, because
and you subsume history, not overthrow it, subsume it,
right,
and perhaps hoist it on its petard. And the principle would be private property.
Well, look. I don't understand in economics. A lot of the theories that you alluded to are lost on me. But I can say this, that it has become obvious that the present system is badly in need of repair. We've been at war for the past 10 years. We're not making wars usually create jobs.
That's all we make anymore, weapons.
And weapons, and still people can't find jobs, you know?
Well, that may be, that's a sacred cow. I just did a program that aired,
I'm sorry, what? That war makes
jobs.
money? Oh, jobs, yes. Well,
the idea that
all the jobs are gone. They shipped them all overseas.
No, well, they did. That's outsourcing. That's one thing that they can do. That's our slave labor. We don't have to see it.
We don't have to see it. They're Chinese prisoners, yes.
Okay,
or Chinese children or something.
Right. Yeah. But that's part of it. But on the other hand, also the idea that the only way that people are going to be able to have money, that is, the people who have money go to sleep at night and they wake up $10,000, $20,000 richer the next day because they're just getting richer because they owe capital assets that are producing wealth increasingly.
Right. Yeah.
And they just say it's perfectly all right for 1% of the population to own all the capital, and the capital...
But it doesn't work. The whole system doesn't work, and that's been shown that... how many economic collapses have we witnessed in the past couple of years? What is happening in Europe? It's a big house of cards.
Okay.
They used to base this on real things. They call it real estate, I think, for a reason, because it was real, it was actual, you could touch it. But now it's all games built upon games, systems built upon systems, loans that were useless, that they knew the loan was useless, and yet they go out and chop it up and sell it as some other kind of asset. And basically, this works as long as all the strings move, as long as everybody's in on the joke. But as soon as something screws up, boom, the whole house of cards fell down. That's what happened to the banks 3 years ago. That's what's happening to Europe right now.
40% of the economy are the financial industry. They don't produce anything.
And they don't produce anything.
Move things around.
And I think that is an unhealthy imbalance. When we had a manufacturing base in this country, not that anybody is going to be really thrilled to get a factory job these days, but it was a job. You had job security. A lot of it was unionized. We've eliminated a lot of the unions in this country.
It's only about 5% of the net of the private sector is unionized.
Yeah, it used to be like 20.
Well,
in the
they
50s,
had a heyday. They had a day, Solidarity Forever, Pete Seeger, all of that. That was really good. They had that. My daddy was there. My granddaddy was a union organizer. But that seems to be passing. And the thing is,
it's not that it's passing because its time has passed, because it's not necessary.
It may be.
passed because of two things. I think the unions got a little fat and a little comfortable and taking care of their higher ups and getting huge union funds. Yes, there were excesses in every union. Any schoolboy knows that now. Unions among a lot of kids who come out of business school have a very bad name. And these kids don't realize that. You kids don't realize. These kids don't realize that the 5-day work week, the 40-hour week, the lunch break, workers' compensation, all of these things
were hard fought.
Hard fought because of unions. Now unions are just synonymous with most people. They're synonymous with people who sit around and get paid a lot for not doing anything.
The people who do that are the people who have the investment class.
Right,
do that.
and so that
and they have vacations. And
that was a part of the union. That was a weakness on the part of the union. Some of the unions got fat. Some of them had silly featherbed jobs. They got a bad name. But at the same time, there's been this systematic attack on the unions since before Reagan. But Reagan is a good example. What did he do? He went in and fired the air traffic controllers. Patco. And what happened after that? More plane crashes. More near misses. And they're still suffering. Excuse me for. I have to get on this. They're still suffering. The air traffic controllers are still, 30 years later, they're still suffering the same kind of conditions. They're overworked. They're working long shifts and really in absurd conditions.
And the pilots are being underpaid?
A lot of the pilots are being underpaid,
They're sleeping on benches practically between flights.
Yes, because,
because they're trying to save it a little bit here and there. Yeah.
Right. A lot of people think airline pilots get paid a lot. Yes, for the ones that work for the major airlines, they've got a few years. Yes, they get paid pretty well, but a lot of the pilots, about half the pilots in this country, don't work. They work for smaller subsidiaries doing local flights, and they're getting paid less than I get paid, and I don't get paid a hell of a lot.
Well, you get paid. Yeah, anyway, let me be a devil's advocate or something like that and everything in terms of, because it's a major issue, and it's one, as you know, I'm influenced myself personally inordinately by a Buckminster Fuller, who was a comprehensive thinker. You cannot go wrong getting in touch with Buckminster Fuller. Happy to say they got a new guy who's become the president of their board over there that's beginning to understand things with some political savvy rather than just design. But he's a great person in terms of understanding, and there's a whole raft of people at the level of design.
Now, what you're saying, Fuller had an understanding of the nuts and bolts, and he had an understanding of the social systems that the nuts and bolts might change.
I don't want to go in great detail, but most of his life he lived what he called anticipatory design science. You don't be political, you invent artifacts and things that make it possible for the good to be done through good design, geodesic and that kind of stuff. But he did at the end of his life become political, but I don't want to stress that. More to the point really is that he became political at the end. He wrote a thing, Grunch of Giants, and he also wrote a thing, Critical Path. They also had the Design Science Decade, where they measured all the availabilities and the trends and so forth in a systems way, which got almost massive support by the intellectual community of measuring the percentage of the world population and trends on a world scale in terms of what's the percentage that are haves and have-nots. You need a definition of terms, a basic question, and they came to the conclusion that we were crossing the 50% mark coming out of history, and we were crossing the 50% mark about 1970, projected from 1950, right on the money. The same time the weapons became species legal. We were transcending material scarcity at the level of our capability. Major focus that's never brought up. But apart from that, is the thing about the design is it gets to the politics. It gets to the politics, and then it gets to the question of private property again. And one of the things is on the airlines. You mentioned the airlines and so forth. And what's happening, the trend in the modern world is for labor, as we think of people doing a job, is becoming less and less relevant to the productive process. You could have the example of a combine that can move across a Kansas field and create 10 billion barrels of grain, and you don't even have a driver, and we're still trying to justify distributing demand or income to the person who would have a job.
Yeah. So
now wait a minute.
Yeah.
Make the point. So in Tom Jefferson's day, labor was really important. It was really crucial. It was important. It was right through here. But it's becoming less so, and the capital assets are producing the wealth. Solar panels can be mass-produced at a factory and cover the Sahara Desert. You don't need people. The labor input to production, which is we say we're workers and that sort of thing, it's there. It'll be there. But the idea that you're only going to distribute buying power to the people by their labor. And you're going to let the capital assets that are producing increasingly the wealth.
Right.
In mass
so what
production.
happens to the rest of the 300 million people in America who need jobs?
Well, what happens is you get to a point where you should stop thinking about jobs for the people as the only way to distribute buying power to the people, because the main problem we have is they don't have demand to clear what the market's capable of producing. We have a capability of producing good for everybody, but the people don't have the money to buy what can be produced by these automated systems. One of the models I'd put, and we ought to get out of that, progressive. They're celebrating the labor theory of value, how good it is to work. And you work hard and workers and all that. I think it's a bull of goods. And the thing is, they ought to form capital in a way where the ownership is democratized to everybody. If you own the back nut on a combine, you'll get money. And you don't have to do anything for it.
Right.
You got it. Now, in the case of the airlines, you know, it's this thing. Airlines would be more efficient. The big airlines would be more efficient if they're and efficient, and above all safer. If there were no human beings in the cockpit. Triple redundancy.
Same with drivers now. Yes.
Okay. Do you understand?
Same with cars.
But we're so hung up on the idea the only way for the people, the mass of the people, to get income, and we let all the capital formation be done in a way that concentrates to the people who already have the saving and they get richer. And just please give us a little job on your
there's also a psychological effect. A lot of people would not get in an airplane that was driven by a robot.
Okay.
There is resistance to that.
Okay.
They've had robotic cars. They've had the ability, cars that drive themselves.
Yeah, but
since the 1940s, they've had that technology.
Yeah.
But
it's a psychological
nobody
thing.
wants to get in a car that drives. I want to drive. So it's more dangerous. More people will die.
Because because you have the pilot.
Because you have the pilot. Because everybody drives their own car.
We need a new design of the economic system, and we can't be having the only way you can get buying power to the masses of the people is for them to have a job.
Yes. It needs to evolve.
But do we do away with the private sector? Do we want everything to be in the government? You end up with nomenclatura like you did in the Soviet Union. There should be attention. Naomi Klein writes well on that. What we should be doing is, that's Kelso. The only system I know, Gaddafi did it. He distributed that you had a business, the people had to own the business. The people should own capital. We don't do away with capital.
Right.
We democratize it.
Right.
Everybody should have an ownership stake in the way the capital is formed. It'll pay for itself in normal terms 5 or 7 years into the future as a way of distributing demand, so that people could have money to have a house, and then they could do what they want to do rather than what a market tells them they have to do. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I think there's a more basic problem in that everybody says, you hear this every day on Fox News, well, it's small businesses that create jobs. But small businesses, this country hasn't been friendly to small businesses for years. The trend has been, look at what happened in New York City and all over the country. Instead of little hardware stores, now we have the big chain stores. It used to be New York City had a lot of little independent businesses, and the big box stores, what they call the chain stores, were all out in the suburbs. That has changed over the past 20 years. Yes,
the same.
And we used to have, record stores and bookstores. Maybe they're a bad example because you can get music and literature through different channels now.
Yeah.
But we used to have record stores and bookstores. Then the big chain stores, the Barnes & Nobles, the Virgins came around. And eventually, well, the record stores all went away because nobody goes out and physically buys music on a disc anymore.
Because Schumpeter and creative entrepreneurialism and creative displacement.
Yes.
And these things are moving.
Yeah.
And all
they also,
communication.
I mean, looking at the music business, it's very ironic. They kind of eliminated their own business. And some people will blame Steve Jobs and Apple for setting up that system. But basically, the music business got so greedy, you know, charging $20 for a CD that cost them pennies to make. The artists have to make money, yes, but at the same time, when they switched over from records to making CDs were cheaper to make, yet they became more expensive.
Do you think it's necessary?
So they basically priced themselves out of the business. Now there's no music business left.
Do you think it's necessary the artists always have to make money? Why do they have to make money? Money corrupts. Why don't we have a way in which people get money by having some ownership of the capital instruments that are creating the wealth?
No, I absolutely think music.
They can do what they want, and
Right.
if they want to go and jam in the afternoon, they can. If they want to go somewhere else, think into the future.
Right.
We're transcending the need to have wage slaves.
Traditionally,
So we need an alternate way to get buying power to the people other than through taxes.
That's what the music business is looking for, because the only way for bands to make money now is by touring, going from city to city, which is a long, arduous process. So, I mean,
He's just targeting a few stars.
Yeah, but
There's
you
not
asked
room
me a
for the
question, a
masses.
couple of questions back. You asked me, do I think that that's the way to make money, making money off of intellectual property? Absolutely, yes, because people should own their intellectual property, and it's been shown to be valuable. And the people who don't own their intellectual property are all kicking themselves. All those artists, mainly African American artists, from the 40s and the 50s, they all signed away their stuff. That is not just as a lot of white artists did too. They signed away their stuff because they figured, well, in the future, nobody's going to want this. And yet, a lot of those songs are making millions and millions of dollars against using a commercial, and the original artist isn't making money. However, let me bring it to this level, because so yes, I absolutely think intellectual property should be owned and should be paid for and licensed out.
What about property?
At the same time, the copyright laws are very old and behind the technology, and they need to be updated because they're very hard to work with. They don't always favor the artist, and even when somebody owns something, it becomes very difficult to collect on those things. So they've gone onto Creative Commons, other ways of dealing with this. As for owning property, that's above my head. I can't imagine not owning
capital instruments that are creating wealth.
Well, I can't imagine, because I have grown up in a capitalist society where I've had to work to buy things, to own things. I don't own too much right now. I own very little, as a matter of fact. I don't own property. I own a computer. I own the clothes on my back. I own some stuff I have in storage in Long Island City. I don't own that much, so ownership isn't that important to me, but at the same time, I know if I owned more, if I owned a building, if I had bought an antique, if I owned something of value, yes, if I owned something of value, I would get money. Right now, I don't own anything that generates money that's worth anything.
Hardly anybody does. It's all owned by a few.
And hardly anybody does.
And that's
so
wrong. And
we've all got to work.
So then do we want to do away with... Do we want to do away with anybody getting that way, or do we want to make it where it could be everybody?
How about we've done away with the idea of retirement? A lot of people can't retire. The retirement plan now.
They're going to work to 80.
Yeah, the retirement plan now is work till you die, sucker.
Yeah, right.
You know, and that is how far we've come in American democracy. One thing I want to do before we go.
Do it quick.
DVTV.blogspot.com. Watch DVTV live on Thursdays, 10 10:30, the longest running call-in show in New York. Thursdays 10:30 on Channel 67, MNN4. Harold, thank you. Thank you for all of you've done over the years.
Thank you for that. We're just touching the spot. I just think these issues, I'm just encouraged, and we've got to keep that system alive. We've got to support that thing and really challenge things fundamentally. Thank you for viewing.
Think outside the box.
In this upcoming holiday season. Thanks for viewing. And
Happy
thanks for
Turkey
coming,
Day.
Richie. Yeah.
Yes, I'm very pleased to be here. I'm thrilled to be here on your show.
Okay. That's it for now.
For the umpteenth time, but I'm thrilled to be here, and I thought I'd run out of things to say. But
never. We can 25 hours easy. Thanks for viewing. We'll see you next time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we ran out of things. That issue of private property, I think they're going to have to get some way of distributing.